In every corner of Africa, stories breathe, tales buried in dust, whispered through firelight. You're about to hear one of them. Welcome to African Horror Stories. Malawi Folklore, the Napolo Spirit. The rain began 3 days before the river rose. At first, nobody in Sanje worried much about it. Heavy rain was part of life during the wet season. The old people even welcomed it. Rain meant the maize would survive another year. Rain meant the dust would finally settle. But by the second night, people stopped sleeping. The wind screamed across the village roofs like something alive. Children woke crying for no reason. Dogs refused to leave their shelters, and somewhere beyond the flooded fields, people claimed they heard drums in the darkness. Not village drums, something slower, something deeper. Thoko stood beneath the leaking roof of the primary school, recording the storm on her phone. She said into the camera, "The flooding in southern Malawi has already displaced hundreds. Relief teams are struggling to reach villages near the riverbanks." Lightning flashed behind her. For a moment, the entire village turned white beneath the storm. Her phone screen glitched violently. Static swallowed the image. And inside the distortion, she saw something moving behind the rain, long, massive, coiling beneath the floodwater. Thoko lowered the phone immediately. The river beyond the village looked empty again. Only rain, only darkness. Her chest tightened anyway. Thoko had arrived from Blantyre 2 days earlier to report on the floods for an online news channel. She expected damaged homes, frightened families, hungry children. She did not expect the silence. Nobody in the village spoke above a whisper after sunset. Nobody looked directly toward the river. And every evening before nightfall, elders tied strips of red cloth above their doors. When Thoko asked why, people avoided answering. Some simply crossed themselves, others walked away. Only one person finally spoke, an elderly woman named Ambuye Lithi. People avoided her hut near the edge of the village. "She remembers the old things," a fisherman told Thoko quietly, "things we should stop speaking about." Naturally, because human beings hear forbidden and immediately sprint toward it like possessed goats, Thoko went to see her that same night. Rain hammered the roof of Ambuye Lithi's hut. Smoke drifted lazily through the warm firelight, while dried herbs hung from the wooden ceiling beams. The old woman sat silently beside the flames. "You came with the flood," she said before Thoko could speak. Thoko forced a nervous smile. "I came to report the flood." Ambuye Lithi slowly shook her head. "No," she whispered. "The flood brought you." Thunder rolled across the valley. The hut seemed colder suddenly. Thoko hesitated before speaking again. "I heard people talking about something called Napolo." The old woman's eyes lifted sharply. Outside, rain battered the darkness. "Do not speak that name carelessly." Her voice had become barely louder than the storm. "Napolo is older than these villages, older than the churches, older than the roads." The fire cracked loudly. "These days," she murmured, "people no longer fear what lives beyond the river." Thoko listened quietly. "They walk where they should not walk. They laugh where silence is required. They mock the old warnings because they think nothing is watching anymore." Lightning flashed outside the hut. The old woman leaned closer. Somebody disturbed the water. Thunder exploded overhead. And now Napolo is awake. That night, Thoko could not sleep. The school building sheltering displaced families smelled of wet clothes, mud and smoke. Children coughed softly in the darkness, while rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling. Around midnight, the rain suddenly stopped. The silence felt wrong. Then came the sound. Shh. Something dragging slowly through mud outside, heavy, wet, circling the building. Nobody inside moved. Nobody breathed loudly. A baby began crying before its mother quickly covered its mouth. The dragging sound stopped directly outside the wall near Thoko. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone flashlight. She moved carefully toward the cracked window. Lightning flashed, and for one horrifying second, she saw the mud outside. There were no footprints, only a massive dragging trail disappearing into darkness, as though something enormous had crawled around the building. The next morning, 3 villagers were missing. Fear spread quickly after that. Women painted white ash symbols above their doors. Old men burned herbs outside flooded homes. Children were forbidden from speaking near the river after sunset. Nobody laughed anymore. Even stranger, nobody said Napolo's name aloud, not after dark. The rescue boats arrived before noon. Among the volunteers was a quiet young man named Chikondi. He helped carry supplies through the flooded village without speaking much, but people stared nervously at him. His boots were soaked completely, not muddy, wet, as though he had walked through deep water moments earlier, even though no rain had fallen all morning. That afternoon, Thoko reviewed footage on her phone. Most clips showed exactly what she remembered recording: floodwater, collapsed homes, villagers carrying belongings through the mud. Then she opened the video from the previous night. Static flickered across the screen. The riverbank behind her came into view. At first, nothing moved. Then the floodwater bulged upward. A shape passed slowly beneath the surface. Huge, long, impossible. The camera distorted violently, and beside the river stood Chikondi, motionless, watching the water. Thoko's stomach tightened. The video ended abruptly. She replayed it again. This time, Chikondi appeared slightly closer to the camera. By evening, villagers were boarding their windows shut. Nobody waited for instructions anymore. Everyone moved with quiet panic. The elders gathered near the center of the village, whispering prayers beneath the growing storm clouds. Red cloth fluttered over nearly every doorway. Thoko found Chikondi standing alone near the flooded fields after sunset. Rain had started again, soft at first, then heavier. "You were near the river last night," she said carefully. Chikondi did not answer immediately. Instead, he stared toward the dark water beyond the village. Finally, he spoke. It was calling people. Thoko felt cold suddenly. What was? Slowly, Chikondi turned toward her. His eyes looked wrong. The whites had become pale gray, like river water before a storm. "Napolo," he whispered. Lightning exploded across the sky.
For one terrible second, something enormous moved beneath the flooded field behind him. Not swimming, circling. Thoko stumbled backward. Chikondi. His face remained empty, almost peaceful. "You should not have come here," he said softly. Then the screaming started. The river burst its banks just after midnight. Black floodwater crashed through homes, carrying trees, roofs, animals, and screaming people into darkness. Villagers ran blindly through the storm. Children disappeared in the chaos. The earth itself seemed to shake beneath the rain, and above the roar of the flood came a sound deeper than thunder, a low, vibrating hiss, ancient, alive. Thoko climbed onto the roof of the school building with several survivors. Below them, the village disappeared beneath black water. Then, lightning tore across the sky, and everyone saw it. Far beyond the flooded trees, a massive shape rising slowly beneath the storm. Only parts of its body became visible through the rain. Serpent-like, enormous. Its eyes reflected pale white in the darkness, watching the village, watching them. Beside Thoko, Lithi began praying softly. "Nobody respects the old boundaries anymore," she whispered. The creature disappeared beneath the floodwater once more, but the rain continued until morning. 3 days later, the flood finally receded. Much of the village was gone. The missing villagers were never found. Neither was Chikondi. Only silence remained. And inside the empty school building, wet footprints stretched across the muddy floor toward the open doorway, toward the distant river, as though something had walked out before dawn. Outside, strips of red cloth still fluttered above the surviving homes. Nobody removed them, because deep down, the villagers believed something was still moving beneath the water, watching, waiting for the next storm.
That's all for today. If you liked the video, let me know by hitting like. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe for more. You can watch another video of mine right here. See you next time.